Hello everyone, I'm Brett, and welcome back to my Jubilee reaction of Should Minors Transition, Detransition versus Trans, our middle ground episode. I am about halfway into the video, but my last recording was an hour long, so we're gonna see if this one also ends up being an hour long. Possibly. We answered 3 questions, and here we're gonna answer 3 more. So, let's get started.
Because it was the next step of what I was supposed
We
to
watched
do.
this part already, but this...
God intended for there to be only 2 genders.
I was raised Christian, but I don't really identify as a Christian anymore. So, I mean, I feel like this... I don't know. I believe that the Christianity that I was raised with, God planned everything out, and he, has this perfect idea for everyone from before they were born. That version of God, I believe, did intend for there to be more than 2 genders, because if there wasn't supposed to be more than 2 genders, he wouldn't have made people want to be, or just be, other genders. And there's been historical evidence of third genders or other genders in societies dating back well beyond the beginning of Christianity. Hundreds, thousands possibly, no, hundreds of years BC, that there's been evidence of different cultures who had respected third genders or other genders beyond just the binary. And if God did intend for there to only be 2 genders, well then fuck God. I don't care. Even if he did, I don't believe in him. So I don't care what any specific person says their religion believes, because of their religion, they still need to respect me and other people, because we don't follow your religion the way that you do. And you cannot push your religion onto us. But I'm curious to see what these people say, because so far they haven't said anything bad about non-binary people, just about transitioning for children. So I feel like possibly the green-haired person might see, I get confused because it says that their pronouns are he, she, and they, but he also said that he's just a feminine man. So I don't know what terms, but I feel like the green-haired person is probably going to step forward for this one, but let's see. Oh, I was wrong. Also only that one. Oh, nope, I was right.
Okay, you go first.
Okay, so as a Christian, I truly believe that God created male and female, and he created that throughout life, throughout the nature, throughout the...
There are so many animals and different species that do not have 2 sexes, 2 genders. Like, what is it, crabs or something? Or maybe it was shrimp. Something. One of them has, a ton of different things. You can look at, clownfish, where they all start as male, and then whenever the dominant female passes on, dies, whatever, the dominant male will become a female clownfish to continue the lineage or whatever. You can look at fungi, mushrooms, which have thousands of genders in a single species of them. Like, bugs, bees don't have the same concept. Like, we push that, oh, the worker bees are all females and the drones are all males. That is completely arbitrary that we pushed onto them. That is just not how their sexes don't work like that, because they're not humans, and we can't push our own constructs onto them. Saying that throughout nature and wildlife there are 2 sexes is completely just ignoring so much of nature and wildlife. So you're already off on a bad start, buddy.
Wildlife throughout, Earth itself. And then the arguments come up into the ocean sides of, well, there's these asexual creatures and stuff like that.
That too.
They were designed that way for a reason, and we humans were not designed to we were designed to procreate and be able to bring life back to the earth because we live and we die.
That's what evolution creates. Evolution creates that, like, a species that doesn't have a way to procreate is gonna die out. But we're at the point in our evolution where we are overpopulating the earth. We are destroying our habitat because of overpopulation. That is usually this happens when the major predator dies out, and then the prey, who are no longer being hunted by this predator. This happened whenever the wolves were taken out of Yellowstone. The prey then grows to a size that is too large for its area to handle, and it messes up whatever they are eating, and it messes up the whole food chain. But we don't have a major predator anymore. We are the major predator. And so we are destroying the earth because there are too many of us, and no other creature can, like, wipe us out. So at this point in time, saying, oh, humans were designed to procreate between a man and a woman and male and female, it doesn't matter if that's the way we were designed or if that's the way we evolved, because there's too many of us who are doing that. So there's no reason for us to not have some people who aren't doing that, because we're not gonna die out from some people being gay or being trans or just deciding they don't want to have children, because there are so many of us that is not currently an issue we are having.
We live and we die. It's a rotation of a process.
We're not a part of the natural order anymore. Like, we're not part of, like, what is it? Darwinism and stuff. Like, we don't have that anymore because we've, like, grown out of it. We've grown past what this world can handle. Ugh. And I'm not suggesting that we, like, start mass killing people to, like, bring down the planet's population and stuff like that. I'm just saying you cannot use that as an argument currently against any of this stuff, because we already have too many.
Process of life in itself, and it's its own journey. So I truly do believe that there is male and there is female, but I can respect people's choices.
Not to mention that human sex is it's bimodal. It's not binary. This is a whole chart of different ways that someone can be intersex between being a typical biological female and being a typical biological male. And there are so many different things in between and different, like, combinations that one can have. And there are so many things that can affect it. Like, it's so wide of a different way that things can exist between the conception and birth and puberty. But that's not the graph I'm looking for. Yeah, sex. This isn't an actual study. Here, this website that I can see. Oh, it's a podcast. I don't feel like listening to the podcast. But this is true, that it's not just one or the other. There is a whole bunch of variation that can happen in between and overlap between the two of them, because every single person is different, and there are so many different aspects to sex that can change between person to person, and that can change your how much of a typical male or female you are. Like, you've got your chromosomes, which people can have the XX or the XY, or they can have, like, XXX or XXY, or a myriad of other chromosomal abnormalities to the basic XX and XY that will still be viable for a person to be born with. It says right here, you've got, like, X, XY, but still female, XXX. You can be XX and still present as male. XXXY, XXY, XYY, quadruple XY, and XXYY. These are all conditions that someone can be born with, but still, like, be a viable person. Be viable to, like, be born and grow up without, like, that's what I mean, yeah. But you've got that, then you've got the external gonads, what your external genitalia look like when you're born, which can be anywhere between the typical two forms that we're used to. And then there's their internal organs, which you can have the external parts that look like one sex and have internal parts that completely don't match, or a mix of them. I believe you can have testes and ovaries, but I don't know which exact form that is. And then there's your hormones. Your hormone levels can be within the average amount, but you can still have, like, there's an overlap between the amount of testosterone that a high testosterone cis woman and a low testosterone cis male will have. There can be an overlap. Same with estrogen, I believe. Like, it's not just, oh, you're born female, you have exactly these things. Without us doing any further testing, we can automatically assume that is exactly what you have. Like, there is overlap between the two of them. It's bimodal, not binary. And people were like, oh, it's basic biology. Yeah, and basic math is 2 + 2, but they still make us learn past that. We don't just learn 2 + 2 and then every other math is solved that way. I hate math. I'm good at it, but I hate it.
However, that's where I stand on it.
Well, I'm not Christian, but I do believe there's only 2 biological sexes, and somehow that's how it's been designed, whether it's by higher power or by evolution. I do believe gender expression has been on a spectrum for centuries, so we do have references to people who've been cross-dressing.
Gender expression is different than sex and gender. I personally have transitioned my sex to be more male, but as I transition to appear more male physically, I have dressed more feminine in my expression because I am closer to a femme man than a masculine girl or a feminine girl.
And we have references to eunuchs. And as somebody who went through transition and detransition, when I started taking testosterone, it's almost like reminded me of my original blueprint. And I feel like I went against my original blueprint and I did a lot of damage to it, and I just cannot go back to who I was. Because without my testicles, I'm just too far gone in my transition. So that's where I'm at.
I do feel bad that they do not feel that they can get back to where they want to be, but I don't think there is any problem with taking the body that you were born with and transitioning it to what you are happy in. I don't think there's any problem with destroying the blueprint if the blueprint isn't what you need to make you happy. My blueprint did not make me happy, and so I Marie Kondo'd it. It did not spark joy, and so I tossed it out. Or at least I'm working on tossing it out. It is your body to do what you want with, whether a higher power wants you to or not.
Can the disagree step forward?
Yeah, we have historically spent more time focusing on and celebrating several genders. There are several different cultures throughout the world that celebrate the different genders, and to negate the fact that they exist and to negate their validity is just wrong.
There are as many intersex people as there are redheaded people on the planet. I can name 12 people off the top of my head who are born intersex. So to pretend like there's man and woman is just erasing an entire group of people. The God you speak of, the first God that intersex people get to meet is the doctor, because it's up to their discretion of just what you're gonna be when they mutilate their body to be a man or a woman, and that is not fair.
That is a terrible thing that does happen to intersex babies. Infants, really, if they are born with the external, like the externally visibly being intersex, the doctor, I don't even know, I think the doctor probably asked the parents, but they'll be like, I can easily make this into look like a penis or look like a vulva. They're like, this one will be easier, so I'll do this one and you can raise your child that way. It's very fucked up that they do that when they're literally an infant instead of letting them just grow as long as they can, like, excrete as necessary. As long as that is still open, I think that they should just be left intact to make the decision if they want to change anything when they are older and able to make that decision. Just like trans people are able to make that decision when they're a teen. if they're in that headspace. It's very much a case-by-case basis, because I don't think every trans person is the same. And I think intersex people should be left intact until they are of an age where they just can decide for themselves what they want, and then be able to have that done.
Yeah, right.
Right, and I think also gender and male and female is not the same
Biological
thing.
sex are different things.
Yeah, we're talking about gender, which is like gender identity, the social aspects to being a man or a woman.
Sex is a label, male or female, that you're assigned by a doctor at birth based on the genitals you're born with and the chromosomes you have. Mostly on the genitals you're born with. I don't think they usually do chromosomal testing on infants. They're just like, yeah, that looks about right.
But
Oops.
male and
Gender is much more complex. It's a social and legal status and a set of expectations from society about behaviors, characteristics, and thoughts. That is a
female
lot of
dictates
words.
sex,
Well,
so like body parts.
I disagree with having sex and gender being two different things. I
But
believe
they
them
are.
to be one. So I believe that there is, they're the same. They're one and the same. They're not different, but we have evolutionary problems within the humanity, because I also see that there are intersex animals that do exist, and that's how they're born. But I also do believe that the initial design was for man and woman, and then somewhere along the way, viruses, mutations, diseases, plagues, all that type of stuff that we have in the world does play a part back onto the world itself. But I believe the initial intent was for God to create
I
Adam
feel like
and
her
Eve,
right now.
not Adam and Steve.
He did not just say Adam and Eve, not Adam and Steve. Oh my god. I don't like Yellow Hoodie Man. This man's a conservative. I'm sorry, what? We are not even on the context of gay people. Also, sex and gender are different, and that's why people can transition their sex to match their gender, but your gender is an inherent part of who you are. Oops.
I'm just gonna say it.
That's homophobic.
I know it sounds homophobic.
It
and I
is.
understand
No,
I'm
it
hitting-
is homophobic.
It is homophobic.
That's okay.
Homophobia made me transition, and that's what you're perpetuating right now. I grew up in a very homophobic family, and since I was a kid, I was always brainwashed, said gay is bad. My parents were not happy that I was naturally feminine. They always tried to make me more masculine. They tried to give me to masculine sports. I was mercilessly bullied at school for my femininity, constantly being told that I'm not a real man, that I'm a sissy. And when I came out to my parents as gay, they took me to therapists and tried to do pretty much conversion therapy on me, which failed.
Oh, yeah.
So I don't believe in God. I believe in people that exist right in front of me, and I believe they should have the right to exist. And so
I'm not saying they don't have the right to exist. I'm
no,
just
but
saying,
I mean,
I'm just saying that
I mean,
was the
they weren't
initial
mistakes
intent.
either. They're just here the way you and I are here right now, and they are who they are, and we have to accept people as they are.
Right, and there are biological differences in trans folks when we look at the brainstem. You know, our brainstems are different. Like that's
Neurologically.
That study that said that was very difficult. If I remember correctly, that study didn't have a large sample size, and the trans people that I looked at had already been on hormones and such transitioning. Also, the fact that there is not that much of a difference between male and female brains and brain stems. There's not enough of a difference. Like I said, it's the bimodal stuff. So there's so much of an overlap that that isn't like proven science that can be used in an argument.
right. Neurologically, we're different.
Yeah,
And
male
so
and female are
how-
different, exactly.
Trans people are different.
Yes.
They've found a distinct difference in the
white matter.
cortex.
There is no
I'll have to look into that because I heard white matter, but not the brainstem. But I've seen it used in arguments, but I think we should. Like, I agree that trans people are who we say we are, but I don't think we should continue using science that's been disproven. Also, I don't want them to find physical differences between trans people and cis people, because that is a step towards being able to, what's the word? Eugenics. That's what the word is. That is the start, them being able to find a physical difference in the brain of trans people before we start transitioning is one of the first steps towards eugenics. And if the wrong people get in power after that type of discovery is made, they will push for eugenics on trans infants, trans fetuses, whatever they end up finding. That's the same way I don't want them to be able to find a trans gene or like an autism gene or a gay gene, any of those kind of things, because if they find the thing that makes us like this, they will either find a way to eradicate it or they'll go the route of eugenics and destroy us that way. Like, that is not a good thing for our community, I don't believe.
No, there is no biomarker for trans. Some brain scan of some gay males is identical to female brain. But
see, that's also what I said. There's so much overlap between brains that is not a valid argument. Like, I still agree with him, but the argument that he's making, the brain scan stuff, that is not viable science right now.
there is no biomarker for trans. Please don't spread misinformation.
There is science that hints towards it. It's just not confirmed.
No,
Well,
there's research.
So therefore, it falls
that
under
hints
the
towards
belief that there is, but there is no scientific fact to back that up, which therefore I believe that God's initial intent was to create male
I
and
think
female.
if God intended to, if God exists and in the way that you believe and just intended to make male and female, then we wouldn't be sitting here. I believe
Intersex people wouldn't
in
exist.
a higher power, right, of my own, and God is not this thing that creates rules and binary situations and laws that can be broken or really made. We're just all here.
Yeah.
You know, like I was born in a female body, but I was never a girl. Never, ever, ever. I can't explain why, but that is my truth. That is the fact. That is who I've always been. And there's no way that I'm gonna look up at this guy at some guide and be like, oh yeah, you made me as a mistake.
Right.
Yeah.
Transitioning improved my sex life.
Okay. I can't answer this one for sure because I have no sex life and I've never had a sex life. But I can say that transitioning has made me more confident in my body and has made me it has made me feel more comfortable being myself and interacting with other people, both flirtatiously and otherwise. I believe it has been altogether positive for my mental health in a way that if I were to pursue a sex life, I would have a better time at it now than before I had transitioned. I think so. But, like I said, I don't have one, so I can't answer this one for sure. Of course, it's all the trans
Who wants
people.
to start?
I could start.
Man, I'm embarrassed.
Not to say that my sex life was bad before, but I think transitioning and coming into my body and feeling comfortable in my skin allowed me to open up more and allowed me to not only be better in bed, but also explore what my sexuality looks like.
That's another point, is that transitioning has made me more open with exploring my sexuality and the types of people that I am attracted to, and beyond just what I believed before, which when I was younger, I believed that the only people I was attracted to were females, both cis women and like trans men and non-binary people, because before I was trans, I didn't like the idea of like the stuff. I didn't like that idea. I didn't know why I had so much discomfort with it, but I did. And now that I've like started transitioning and started accepting my body more and feeling more at home in my body, I've been able to explore the types of things that I think that I would like and open myself up more to thinking about my sexuality beyond what I did previously.
Like,
Being trans also like made sex really complicated for me too, because I'm a straight guy, and I pass very well, and majority of the women that I've been with, I would have to eventually kind of like break it to them that I was trans and deal with a lot of rejection. And with somebody, I would never let girls touch me or see me without clothes on. Not having a penis made me feel inferior as a man, and that no one would want me, which is why I like rejected that part of myself and never even let it be loved. It took a lot of really accepting that people were going to accept me and be attracted to me and love me and want to give me pleasure regardless of what was in my pants. And that took a long time. It took until I was like, I think I was 21 when my ex-girlfriend and I started dating. From that point on, I realized that just letting someone love me was half the battle. And once I let that piece come into play, I mean, it changed my life.
Do you want to go? You want to go?
Y'all can go. I'll go last.
I mean, so even though I detransitioned, in the beginning, especially when I was on hormones, like it increased my sex drive a lot, and there were a lot of aspects to that was like enjoyable to explore my fluidity for sure. I was able to date a lot of people, and I think like from detransitioning, it's like the opposite of that. Like my sex drive completely changed in a way that like there's good aspects to not being horny 24/7. It helped me be more comfortable in my body, even with detransitioning, which sounds weird, but like having a trans male body was like so different from the norm. So like I had to accept certain parts of myself. So like even with detransitioning, it helps me accept like certain parts of myself that I don't have still.
Absolutely.
I did identify as a gay man before I transitioned. And like those relationships, I feel like I always kind of had like out of body experiences when we were like intimate. And even after I transitioned, before I had bottom surgery, I like, just like the anxiety and the dysphoria that I would feel whenever I was intimate or like a partner would try to be intimate with me was just like crippling.
Yeah.
So then when I had surgery and I felt more affirmed in my body and, you know, it feels right to me now, I'm finally able to have those intimate connections with people and, you know, form those deeper bonds. So it's really helped me a lot.
I'm so happy for you. That's amazing.
Thanks.
Yeah, of course.
When I came out as trans when I was 18, I moved to Miami, and it wasn't until I got my gender-affirming surgeries where I was, where I did lose my virginity, because I was just not comfortable doing that. I was like, I'm not presenting in my best light, and I think I could get there.
Yeah, for me it was like I'm not fitting the role that I'm supposed to play in this relationship.
It felt weird, and you also attract a different type of partner. Back in my day, I used to attract what we call a chaser versus someone who was genuinely attracted to the female form, which is someone who I wanted to, that's the role I felt. And so that's where I was comfortable, and now I'm comfortable. In Virginia, Virginia, the T word did not exist. That was on Jerry Springer and Maury Povich, and that's where that stayed. No one was trans. And so I transitioned when I was about 18. I moved to Miami, and my joke is that I hit the tarmac, and I said, I'm a woman, by the way. I remember I came out to my mom, and I was super nervous because I'd come out as gay years and years before, because that was so much easier. But when I came out, I remember my mom just asked if I was happy, if I was healthy, and if I was going to finish school, because she had already paid for it.
Fair enough.
And I said yes.
Can the disagree step forward?
Transition definitely ruined my sex life. I was fine with my penis, but a year after estrogen, I felt like that part didn't belong on me anymore. So I went ahead and had sex reassignment surgery. After that, my sex drive was gone pretty much. I kept on having complications. I wasn't able to keep my neovagina open despite rigorous dilation. I had multiple revisions, including colon vaginoplasty. I just got some of my sex drive back last year when I started detransitioning with testosterone, but it's kind of traumatic to have male sex drive back without my penis. Also, I want to say that sexuality is fluid. My sexuality has definitely changed once I lost my testosterone. Before, I was strictly attracted to men. After I lost my testosterone, I was attracted to people in general, because now I didn't have this male sex drive, so I couldn't relate to men as much. You know, they wanted to have sex, but I just wanted to hold hands and cuddle. And now my body dysmorphia / actual gender dysphoria as well is worse than ever before. I do feel like I'm stuck in a surgically created body. I just don't think I've been really myself by trying to become a woman. Yeah, so transition did take a lot from me.
Must be really, really hard. Yeah.
It's okay.
Yeah.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah, sure.
If you had like found the results that you desired in the beginning, would you feel differently than you do now?
No, because I realized I just miss being a man, you know, I just miss being obsessed about sex and money. I don't want to do the whole emotional thing. And I'm talking about stereotypes, okay? So I regret, it's just like now I'm a medical patient for life. Also having sex drive back, it just reminds me that I lost all these years. I could have been having fun, whether it's chasers or, I definitely have internalized homophobia. So internalized homophobia also pushed me into transition because I felt like chasers weren't good enough because I wanted to be a woman. I wanted to escape my homosexuality. But now I realize at the end of the day, I'm a gay man and I'm still living with internalized homophobia because therapists actually never helped me with that.
It's fascinating that you say that because I dated men and women, and in my transition, I felt like I had an internalized homophobia when I was with men because I didn't feel like a gay man. And that was really hard for me to like figure out because I had this journey for so long, and a lot of sexual experiences were good, but I was on Grindr and I'm sleeping with these men and they're treating me how I would want to be treated in a social setting, but I'm like, I was really, really masculine in my presentation, but I tended to be kind of feminine in my roles within sex. And so I think that also got me to realize that I wanted to detransition because it was a reflection of the relationships that I had. Like, to follow kind of some stereotypes, like I did miss being a woman in some of those like social settings, like with how women interacted with me, with how men interacted with me. Like, so yeah, that's heavily relatable to that for sure. So I do not regret my transition. Shocking, I know. That was like a really great time for me in the beginning. I really was able to explore and express myself in ways that I could not have done without hormones and surgery. I learned so much about how people treat people based on gender and looks in general. I feel like I would not be the person, especially the confidence and security that I have within myself if I didn't transition as presenting as a woman in this world. My dynamic with men in general is so much different. I mean, I was very insecure, very submissive, very quiet, and now I'm able to speak up for myself because of that.
Yeah, I was actually gonna say, during my transition, I didn't actually have a high sex drive from the hormones, and ever since I came back, my sex drive has been higher ever since, and I think it's because I'm no longer on the estrogen. My testosterone levels are increased after I changed back to being who I was originally born as, and it also kind of opened up my eyes to say, maybe I wasn't really a female. This is probably what I would like my future spouse to have, to look upon it. And I'm proud that I actually have that sex drive back again because I felt like I lost it for a long time.
That is definitely an interesting point to make with the different hormone therapies and how they work. I am on testosterone hormone therapy, and so I can definitely relate to the people who went through the testosterone at HRT and had their sex drive like increase dramatically. But I do think that is an interesting point to be made with people who go through the estrogen HRT and have to deal with this loss of sex drive that they might have had beforehand. And again, the people who go off of estrogen and then suddenly have their sex drive back, but might not have the parts that they wanted to go with it. That is a very interesting discussion to be had. Now, what's this last one?
The LGBTQ plus community is not as accepting as they claim.
This definitely depends on what part of the community you're in, but I do believe this is true. I do agree with this. There is a lot of backlash towards detransitioners for whatever reason they detransitioned. I believe we should respect detransitioners and we should accept them into our spaces if they still want to be part of these spaces, whether because they have a queer sexuality or because the experiences they had with gender transition make them still feel like they have a community in retransitioning back into their born sex. the sex they were assigned at birth. I do believe they should be allowed to have a space in our community if they want that. I think the only reason we should push back on detransitioners is if they are trying to push to stop transition for actual trans people because of their experiences. I think that's the only time that they should get backlash is if they're trying to use their personal experience to push against transition for all trans people or to try to make it harder for us. I also think this in general, they're not always as accepting. There's a lot of gay people who aren't as accepting of trans people. Like, you can just look at the TERF movement that has taken a lot of young lesbians and such and radicalized them against trans people by making them feel like we're a danger to them, when really the danger to them is conservatives and the cis hetero people who are against them and who want to take away their rights. You'll see TERF movements teaming up with, like, anti-feminist movements and far-right movements, and the people, the TERFs, they don't realize that they're fighting against trans people. If they get rid of us, they're the next victims. Like, it's just gonna keep going down to them. That is how that works. They go for what they think is easiest, and they break us apart into these smaller factions, and then once they can take us out one by one, it's easier for them. It's the same thing with, there was a lot of discourse between bi versus pan in the past. I've seen less of this recently, but I know this used to be a huge debate where people were like, oh, claiming you're bisexual is transphobic because it doesn't include trans people or doesn't include non-binary people. Saying you're pan is biphobic and transphobic because it's saying that trans people are different, or it's saying that, like, bi people are whatever. And you can go back and they would, like, go back and show, like, the Bisexual Manifesto, which describes things the same way that pan does, and there's all this discourse, and I think we should just let people identify with whichever one they want to identify with. There's nothing wrong with either label. It's up to the own person what they want to identify with. If they think that pansexual fits them better, then they can identify as pansexual and be that person. And if they think bisexual defines them better, they can define that how they want, and that is their own sexuality. And we should all... And to the people who are against them, they don't care whether you're bi or pan. They think either one is a disgrace or a sin or whatever, and they will go for both of you and try to take away your rights for either of you. They don't care what the specific label is. If it is too queer, if it is too trans, if it is not straight and cis enough, they will come for it. They will separate us up, and they will take us out one at a time until there's no one left. It's the same thing with all this ace discourse where people used to discourse about whether asexual and aromantic people were queer enough to be part of the community. And they are, if they believe their experiences are. Like, they are a sexuality that is different from the norm of cis heterosexuality. Heterosexuality in general. They are different from the norm, whether their attraction, if they have any sexual or romantic attraction to the opposite gender, that has nothing. They still, because of their difference in how they feel that, whether they don't have romantic attraction or whether they don't have sexual attraction, that still affects them in a way that we as the other queer people can understand and we can have community with. And there's the, like I mentioned in the last one, I believe, I mentioned something about Moge, which was this community, what was it? Marginalized orientations gender and intersex, I believe, is what the acronym stood for, but I can't quite remember. Where there was a lot of these, there was a lot of, like, people who would make their, like, microgenders or micro-labels and stuff like that. And I don't think they're hurting anyone. There was a lot of people who were angry at it. They were like, we're making a mockery of the queer experience. They're making a mockery of LGBT people. I don't think so. The conservative is gonna hate us, whether you're someone who goes by they, them, or someone who goes by cat, self. They're gonna hate you, whether you say that you are a demi-boy, or whether you say that you're a star gender, they're going to hate you. And that is an issue for them to deal with, not for us to push against our own community, to push against our own community and push them back and say that they're the reason that people hate us. Because people are going to hate us, whether we let some 13-year-old say that they are autistic gender or whatever. They're going to hate us whether that happens or not. So why attack the people who are already getting hated on by others? We need to stand together as a community and not break apart into these factions. There's a lot of stuff going on Tumblr right now that I've seen, which is this debate between people who... I don't want to say it's just between trans women and trans men, because there's people on both sides from both experiences, but people who argue about trans misogyny and this whole debate between trans misogyny and trans misandry, where there's obviously trans misogyny is the intersection of transphobia and misogyny that is usually directed onto trans women and trans femme people. And there are people who say, well, there's a specific intersection of transphobia and misogyny that affects trans men and trans masculine people. And they've gone and called this trans misandry, which isn't claiming that there's this misandry, which that's a whole different issue. But it's this specific experience that people like myself do go through, if we're getting into specifics. And then there's this whole discourse going on about whether that's allowed, whether that is trans-misogynistic, just to even have a term for ourselves to describe this certain intersection that we face. And I don't want to get into that right now. But, we create all these little divides, and we don't need to. What we need is to be there for each other, because we are all that we can count on. We together are the only people standing up for ourselves. The only way we can win for all of us, or for any of us, is to win together. And some people just need to get this through their heads. But let's see what these people say, because, yeah. I know this is talking specifically about futures. Yeah, I figured they would all come forward. I figured they would all come forward because everyone pretty much knows.
Yeah. I'm embarrassed to agree. But that is true information.
There's still so much transphobia within the people in the LGBT community that hasn't been addressed yet.
Shoot, there's transphobia within trans people.
Absolutely. When I was transitioning in high school, I searched for acceptance from the cis hetero world, and now I feel like I'm doing the opposite and searching for acceptance from my own community half the time. Like when I was in college, the queer community on my campus hated me because I did heteronormative guy stuff. I played lacrosse, I was in a frat, but I wasn't that guy, I guess, that they had in their head. And every time I would go to the LGBT club meetings, I would get they would stare into my soul like I was just this awful thing. And it's always just made me feel invisible and small in whatever space I'm in. And I find that just really disheartening.
And it happens in a lot of other cultures and communities as well too. So
it's funny that
it just happens.
You mentioned the transitioning in high school part and that shift from, searching for acceptance outside and then turning around and then having to search for acceptance within the community.
Yeah.
Because I did notice that when I was still living as a trans man, when I passed really well, all of a sudden it was like I wasn't welcome in these spaces anymore. Until they knew, and then you get that icky feeling of you only want me here because of that. And now I have the D-trans aspect where no community wants me. No one. I'm still part of the I'm part of the LGB part, but I've lost people that I thought they liked me for me, and it didn't matter what I was.
I feel really bad for her. Like I mentioned, I think we should open our arms and accept detransitioning people, because they go through a lot of the issues that we're going through. Just because they were wrong in their transition doesn't mean we should turn our backs on them. Whether they are queer in their sexuality or not, we should keep our arms open for them. The only time I disagree with that is when they are trying to turn around and lash back at our community and make things harder for us. I wish that she could have the community that she deserves for everything that she has gone through and everything that she is going through. And our community as it is in shambles.
Right.
But then all of a sudden, detransitioning was the thing that I've been called a traitor.
Yeah, me too.
You know, it's,
Me too.
they don't want me. The rest of the world doesn't want me.
That's not true. That's not true.
It can often feel that way. It can feel isolating.
But it feels really
that way.
isolating. Like, this is not a club.
It's not a
You
club.
know, and it's not like a personality trait that I'm just taking up, and God forbid one day I change my mind. I won't, but like, or something happens where I have to detransition. I would hope that the people who stood by my side through everything else would still be there for me because of who I am, period. And not because of an effing label over my head.
And even when I transitioned, I dealt with the traitor to everyone. It was, you know, oh, you want to be a man and the patriarchy. And I was like, I get it, but also, yeah. But what I found very interesting was like this divide between trans men and trans women. When I first started doing a lot of advocacy, I was told that just being in the space, that I was taking up too much room, that I was taking up too much space and don't speak and all of these things. And I was like, wait a minute, but I'm trans too, right?
Yeah.
This community also belongs to us too.
Right.
So
that is one of the things I was talking about with that debate about transmisogyny and transmisandry, is that one of the things that trans men deal with more than trans women is this erasure of ourselves and our identities. We are either erased or we're treated like these, like the transphobes treat us like these little lost lesbians or whatever. They don't, a lot of the debates about things, like when they talk about trans people in the bathrooms, they always talk about the trans women being a threat, but they don't talk at all about trans men. When they're talking about trans people in sports, they always talk about trans women beating cis women, but they don't talk about trans men at all. And it's this, they erase us from the issues because they don't see us as much of a threat, but it still hurts us to be completely erased, even from advocacy, like he's saying. We're told to step back and let trans women have all of the spotlight, but it is our community too. All of us should have a say. All of us should be allowed to speak on it. And obviously, I think these things are terrible for trans women, but it's like things like with reproductive health and the abortion ban. Whenever we were saying to talk about like people who can be pregnant people, that sort of stuff, people are like, oh, that we're going to offend the trans women. No, we're talking about us, the trans men and the trans masks, the people who are born female or who have an ovary, or who have ovaries and a uterus, and people who are actually affected by this currently. We get erased from the conversation and then we get forgotten. I've heard of trans men who are not able to get the reproductive health they need because they had their gender legally changed, and suddenly they aren't able to get insurance to cover things like pap smears or an abortion, even different things like that. I'm not sure if abortion gets covered by insurance, but it's things like that. We get erased from the conversation, and then we just get forgotten and left behind.
So that was something that I grappled with for a while.
I hung out with a lot of gay women, and then when I transitioned, I definitely lost my space there, and that was like really hard for me to navigate, because being shunned out of these female spaces for me was really hard and difficult. And then when I got to the trans male community, there was a lot of competition. Who looked the best, who passed the best, like that was very difficult.
Oh, yeah.
Shoot, fortunately I had a full beard, so it was like an easy, like, you know what I mean? Like, but still, like, I heavily resonate with trans men still, and I definitely resonate with trans women from detransitioning and gender non-conforming people. So it's like, where do I belong?
Weird position to be in, because it's like one community, like I said, doesn't really want you, but you don't fit in. You can't really go all the way back, so you don't fit in with the rest of them.
We just shouldn't have to categorize.
Yeah,
Like, we shouldn't have to float around, wonder where we belong. Like,
we have the other detransitioners,
like,
but even then, we're all still vastly different individuals who have vastly different life experience, political views, religious beliefs.
Right.
You know,
you're not just
experience how we
detransition.
yeah,
Right,
exactly.
that's no
Experience how we
with the
do
trans
that.
community, right?
In some ways, it's empowering because it feels like even though all this happened, you're being seen as an individual for almost the first time after, you know, spending my high school years being lumped in by both the LGBT community and the rest of the people in a category. But it's also very isolating because you don't have really that community support that other places get.
Bye.
Yeah.
That's it.
Bye, y'all.
Thank you guys so much.
It was
really awesome.
So trendtastic.
It's great to talk to all of you.
I'm glad they were able to hug and still be all nice and stuff at the end of this. I think that was a very interesting video, and there was a lot of interesting perspectives in this video, and I can't believe it took me 2 hours to talk about this video. I think a lot of the arguments were very good in this, and I do think that the people they chose for this were a good, diverse collection of both trans people and detransition people, both in the reasons that the people detransitioned and their beliefs and points of view afterwards. I think they actually did very good in the casting for this one and who they called in to do this debate. There are some Jubilee debates where they don't have very good casting at all. But that is all that I have for you today, folks. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please make sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe. I really appreciate it, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!